Hi, I'm Dave Cooper, founder of Waypoint Advisors. I'm an attorney and site selection consultant. For the past 20 years, I've represented companies on their industrial development, site selection, and incentive negotiation process in the U.S. I've had several clients lately ask for me to conduct training seminars for their tax teams, real estate managers, and other operations personnel. So I'm doing this video series to help inform my clients and any prospective clients about the site selection and incentive negotiation process in the U.S. In this context, site selection refers to finding a location for projects that have a significant economic impact. So it may be a manufacturing company like an automotive manufacturer, steel manufacturer, building products manufacturing, any kind of manufacturing. Could include research and development, headquarters, distribution, logistics centers, power generation, including solar farms, and even retail and mixed-use development. So most of these projects are going to have a large capital investment. Normally, when we're negotiating incentives for projects, the capital investment is at least $10 million, but $100 million and up. Total capital expenditure projects are more common, and they can go up significantly from there. Most of these projects also create a lot of new jobs, but they don't necessarily have to. A typical job might be $100 million in capital investment and 100 new jobs, but certainly projects like solar farms don't create a lot of new jobs, yet there's still opportunity to go through the site selection and incentive negotiation process. This process is often conducted on a multi-state basis where we'll run a site search over a number of different states trying to find the right location, but it can also include expansions and developments where the site has already been determined. So there's still opportunity even when a company is expanding or already has a site identified. Usually we negotiate incentives as part of that site selection or that expansion process. Our goal is to help you find the optimal location for your new project that results in the most profitable business case on a risk-adjusted basis. So we're going to take a lot of things into consideration, such as labor cost and availability, the logistics, inbound, outbound, whether you need rail, highway access, barge, transload facility, all these different factors that are important for your project, the utilities, your water, sewer, gas, and of course your electric load profile and total capacity requirements. Your speed to market, that's always important. Some sites can come online a whole lot faster than others. Of course, your tax burden and how your operational structure aligns with the final state's tax structure. And of course, we're going to try to reduce your cost to the extent possible using incentives. And incentives can both offset your upfront cost, and then also they can provide reductions to a number of your ongoing costs, and we'll get into those throughout this series. Ultimately, we want to ensure that the final location that you choose is a good fit for your business, and that includes more than just the financial component. It also includes cultural components and making sure that your project team is comfortable in whatever the final location is. We want that to be a good relationship with the state and with the local economic developers and their team, and we want the project to be a success, and that involves more than just the dollars and cents of the equation. We also want to reduce the administrative burden for your project team. We do this full time, and we see in many instances where companies try to do it themselves, and they have their operations or real estate team running site selection process for their projects, and it takes them away from their day job. And so we want to help relieve that administrative burden both during the site selection process, but also through the compliance phases of the process. And we want to implement creative solutions as needed for your project. We'll get into some examples later, but we've come up with all kinds of creative solutions. We've rewritten both state and local codes to meet the needs of the project. We've brought in all kinds of infrastructure improvements and done a lot of things to take a site that otherwise might not have been ideal and make it a great fit for these projects. The site selection process typically involves 5 key phases. The first is the client and project intake phase, where we will meet with you and your project team to determine the key project parameters. We will then evaluate the top location options. So we'll look at different regions or corridors where you're interested in developing your project. We will then conduct a desktop analysis that is preceded by submitting requests for information to the different states that might be eligible for the project. We'll then review the sites, both, as I mentioned, on the desktop analysis and then also through in-person site visits. Throughout the whole process, we'll be negotiating incentives. That's kind of an ongoing part of the process. And then ultimately, we will work with you to select the final site and implement your project. During the project intake phase, we need to get to know the company and what the key drivers are behind the project. We also need to understand what the project is going to cost, what your capital expenses are expected to be, both from a real property and from an equipment perspective, and then also what are your labor needs? How many employees will you require? What's the nature of the employees? What's the education level and skills required for those employees? What do you expect the wages to be? And we'll work with you on those too. We'll go through a labor analytics part of the process. We also want to understand your logistics requirements, whether you need rail or immediate highway access and so forth. Also want to understand, of course, your utility needs. We mentioned those already, in the project timing. So we'll go through and put together a whole project profile with you and your team and use that as the basis for our initial analysis. This is the project intake questionnaire that we're going to go through in our initial meeting with you and your team, where we'll go through all the important components of the project. We'll talk about timing, we'll talk about the capital investment breakdown, the site and building requirements, all the different criteria for your building and for your site, how much acreage you need, what size the building is, the layout, of course, all the utility requirements that we mentioned, and any key operational considerations. We'll also go through the labor requirements and the anticipated wages for those different positions and discuss the incentives that might be available for the project. Once we've created our project profile, we'll then move into the request for information phase of the process. So during this phase, we'll prepare an RFI that will include all the key information about the project. Now, this can be on a confidential basis, and that's one of the benefits of using a site consultant or an attorney, is that we can do this under a project code name, and we can deliver it on your behalf without your company name having to be on there if you don't want it to be. And we will describe the key parameters of the project and what we are looking for in a site or an existing building. Once we send out the RFI to however many states you want to have involved in the process, we'll get responses back, and then we'll review the sites that they send to us to conduct our desktop analysis. The goal is to take a broad universe of sites that the states might propose to us and shortlist those, eliminate as many sites as we can that don't fit the criteria of our project, and get down to a short list of maybe 10 to 12 sites that we can actually go and visit as part of our site selection process. Once we've completed the desktop analysis, we'll move into the site visit phase of the process. It's at this point that we'll actually go on the road and visit any remaining sites. Might be 5, 10, up to 15 sites that remain, depending on the number of states and the nature of the project. It's during this phase that we might initiate incentive discussions and determine what incentives could be available for your project. But most importantly, we want to get on the ground and look at the site and determine whether this site could be a good fit for your project or not, and let you get a feel for the community and better understand what their drivers are, what the culture is of that community, and whether your project would be a good fit in that location. And you can only get so far in a desktop analysis. You really have to get on the ground and meet the people and see the site to be able to fully understand whether that site could be a good fit for your project or not. Once that process is complete, we will further eliminate sites, and we'll get down to hopefully 2 or 3 remaining sites. Once we're down to 2 or 3 sites, we'll really begin the incentive negotiation process in earnest, and this will start with a request for proposals. So we'll move from the RFI to an RFP. This RFP will ask those remaining sites and locations, which would be a city, government, state, other key stakeholders, to provide an offer for our project to locate on their site. Once we've received those, we'll evaluate them from a cost basis. So we will prepare a spreadsheet that will evaluate on an apples-to-apples basis any remaining sites, and we do that on a present value basis. So essentially what we do is look at the key criteria like labor, logistics, tax cost, development cost, and any other key factors, utilities, run these out over the duration of the project, maybe 20 years, discount them all back to present value at your determined discount rate, and then come up with a cost profile for each site. And of course, that's the objective part of it. We're also looking at the subjective part and whether your project would be a good fit for that community and other intangible factors. The goal of the incentive negotiation process is to help reduce your cost and help the project be a success. So we want to help you reduce your upfront costs. This might involve free or discounted land or other offsets to your initial capital cost, and reductions to your ongoing operating costs through property tax incentives or sales and use tax or withholding tax rebates, and a number of other incentives that we'll get into later. We also want to solve any kind of open issues with the site. So there may be soil conditions or issues with ingress or egress, traffic signalization, roadway improvements that are needed, utility lines that need to be brought in. So our goal is to use that incentive negotiation process to help make the project viable at this location. In addition to negotiating incentives, during that site visit and site evaluation phase, you'll go through a comprehensive due diligence phase that will involve all the site analytics. It may be geotech, your soil borings, your phase 1, phase 2 environmental site assessments, having the survey performed, all your title searches, and everything else that's required to make sure that the site is suitable for your needs. And so once we determine that the site is suitable and understand what the risks are, and have the incentives negotiated, you as a company will then be in a position to make a final determination about the site where you want to land your project. At that time, we will then have an announcement. We'll go through a process of signing documents, and we'll have the deal finalized and sealed up. We would then prepare a compliance binder that will have all the key documents enclosed in it, along with a summary of anything that you have to do to make sure that you uphold your end of the bargain for the incentives that have been offered for you. A few best practices as you go through the site selection process are first, to consider the confidentiality needs of the project. Some projects that we've worked on have been run on a very visible and public basis, and we've had success with those, but for the most part, projects want to remain confidential. So use a project code name and pick a code name that doesn't give away what the project is. So you want to maintain confidentiality throughout the process to the extent possible. We help with that by being able to interface on your behalf. And we can go over a lot of different ways to help maintain confidentiality. Even on site visits, a lot of the time, we'll be the ones who hand out our business cards, and we might have you not wear company apparel and not bring business cards along or anything like that to help you maintain confidentiality. We'll also get confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements in place with state and locals and utility providers and anyone else who's going to be present on site visits or receive confidential information. You also need, if you're a publicly traded company, you also need to consider your SEC reporting requirements and whether you're entering into any kind of material agreements that require 8K type disclosure. Another key concept or best practice is to consider the relationships with the state and local governments. We like to maintain great relationships with these economic development practitioners. It's great folks all over who help recruit and bring in these wonderful projects and help create jobs and capital investment for their communities. And so we like to try to remain close to them and maintain those relationships. That's an important part of the process. Also, the project documentation and checklist process. There's a whole lot that goes into it. We'll send out literally thousands of emails and have so many different variables and components that you have to have a comprehensive project checklist to follow as you go through it. We'll help you with that. I mentioned the compliance binder already. That's an important part of it too. You don't want to just land at the site, start your project, and then have no idea how to comply with any requirements for the incentives that you've been offered. On the competition side, it is important to maintain competition and leverage throughout the process. We don't want to overdo this by having stalking horse type states that are in the mix just in order to run a competitive process. You and your project will lose credibility if you do that, but you do want legitimate backups. I've seen a number of projects have to fall to their second or third choice because of a major site issue that comes up in the process. And so it is truly important to keep multiple sites on the table, and that does help maintain competitive leverage throughout the bargaining and negotiating process. We also want to build a team around the needs of the project. So my personal focus is on that site selection and incentive negotiation, but we'll work with your engineers, your design team, your developers, and anyone else to bring the right team together, both internally and through third-party external consultants and others. Also want to have a good communication strategy. Figure out who all needs to be in the know, both internally and externally. Make sure that they're included on all the emails as appropriate, and also like to have at least weekly project team calls. So the site selection process is a multidisciplinary effort. Our role as site consultants is really in this middle box. We want to be the quarterback for the entire process, overseeing the site selection, incentive negotiations, all the project agreement drafting, compliance and implementation. But you can see that there's so many different components that go into the development of a major industrial project. So you have the construction team, you have to have the utilities, your environmental, logistics, any kind of public law considerations, tax, workforce, real estate. So we try to bring this whole team together and make this one unified process. We want your project to be a success, and we believe that begins with accountability, both from your team and from ours, as well as the state and local government officials who we are working with. We take an analytical approach and try to provide you a rational basis for the location based on cost and other parameters. And we're very relationship focused. We've worked with these economic developers for a long time, been doing this for 20 years, and value those relationships. We also want to help solve the problems that the project or the site may encounter, and we believe that the best incentive package is one that is tailored to the needs of the project. Here's a list of potential incentives that might be available for your project. They start off with cash grants or other direct offsets to your initial capital investment, free or discounted land, withholding tax rebates or other wage-based reimbursements, infrastructure grants, property tax abatements, and these come in many different forms like pilot or fee in lieu of tax programs. We'll get into those in more detail in subsequent videos. Sales and use tax credits, reductions or other exemptions, state income tax credits, discounted loans or other financing mechanisms, whether it's through TIFs or tax-exempt bonds, training grants, permit fee waivers, and really strategic drafting of incentive documents. This can't be understated. Often the devil's in the details, and by properly structuring your incentive and project agreements, you can save yourself a lot of money down the road. And then finally, just coming up with creative solutions that help your project be a success. Here's a sample of our cost-based analysis. Don't make too much out of the locations. This was from a hypothetical project, but it does help you to see the type of information that we are considering when doing the cost analysis. So it would include logistics, labor, utilities, site, tax cost, and any grants that might offset those costs over time. So you'll notice there are about a dozen tabs across the bottom, and each one of these includes the data that flows into the spreadsheet, and that's run out over 20 years typically, and then all of it is discounted back to present value and results in one total present value cost number that we use to objectively evaluate the cost of doing business in a particular location. That's an overview of the site selection process. Here is my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if I could be of assistance on any of your projects. I'm going to be following this video with several others that go into more detail on the individual topics. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.